college admissions officers, what is the worst cringiest essay you have ever read? I remember an applicant who wrote at length about how she panics under pressure, lacks leadership skills, and can't stand hospitals. It was a medical school application. I called her to make sure we weren't getting trolled. 10 seconds into the call she began panicking and said she doesn't do well with stressful phone calls and hung up. I called later to check up and she seemed to have recovered. No interview for her though. He translated his essay into binary by hand. Not a college admission officer, but a lady at an engineering conference was bragging about her son's 750 math sat and how he was so brilliant and his application essay was so unique that he would surely get into MIT. I'm about 90% certain that application went immediately into the trash. I once spoke with an admissions officer who told me about the worst one they ever read. A prospective student wrote about how they were riding in the car with their parents and saw through the window a young boy tied up duct taped in the backseat of a passing car. The prospective student said nothing about it to anyone and tried to make the essay about their struggle with the experience. Hey, I can actually contribute to this one. I have a student from Nigeria who has a decent grasp of the English language but doesn't really understand the generic platitudes that are expected in admissions essays. His first paragraph described how he is very similar to his father and they like the same things. They both like the same music, they like looking at the stars, and they both really like boiled yams. He then proceeds to go into how his mother would prepare them and what other foods they would eat with them. For reference, this is a master's program in computer science, so none of this is relevant. If it was some stuck-up kid I might let him crash and burn, but he was really nice and genuine, so I gave him a nice push on what subjects he should cover. One admission officer told me about when he did admissions for UCLA and read one that was written well, but he ended it saying that he always wanted to go to USC. He wrote it for both schools, but forgot to change the ending. I talked with some admissions people and their biggest peeve is when someone talks about volunteering for an underserved population and they end with I went there to help them, but they ended up helping me. Chestnut. I wrote my college essay on Maximilien Robespierre and how he inspired me to study political science. In graduate admissions, read one essay that was essentially a love letter to the faculty superstar that the student wanted to work with. By the end of it, I knew nothing about the actual student. What makes it cringy though is that the faculty member had never heard of her. She didn't make contact with him before applying, and her entire essay was information off his website. Also cringy, his lab is full, so he doesn't take new students. Not quite college admission, but I got to read several essays for a scholarship fund we had created on campus a couple of years back. This was a private fund that we generated largely from doing large scope sales or events. Anyway, this was aimed at disadvantaged high school seniors trying to attend a 4-year university. While I loved the process, it was sad to see that most applicants were clearly underqualified and MO's essays were utter crap, especially from the kids that needed the money the most. A girl had her mother write her essay for her and actually lied through the whole damn thing. To start, let me point out we made high school presentations to promote our scholarship. This lady happens to work at one school my peers presented at. She was complete beach to the presenters and treated them like crap. When she found out that we were part of the scholarship her daughter was applying to, her demeanor changed drastically, like flipping a switch. And she basically said that her daughter was bad at writing essays and she may have given her a helping hand writing it. This was bad enough of a confession to casually make, but the best part was the actual essay months later, when we got it. Turns out her daughter attended my high school. Her struggle was being run over by a car, which took her out of sports and left her without being able to walk for months. According to the essay, she persevered and through sheer determination was able to walk in a few months. And check this out, play ducking soccer. Red flag. Of course, the dates when this supposedly happened was when I was still a high school student in the same school. In short, all this crap never ever happened. Further, the dumb chick gave us a letter of rec from her soccer coach which very clearly stated her position on the team and dates. Well, she played during the time she was paralyzed, so dumb. There are more essays that I can share, but this one was the one that made the panel furious. I got an admissions package with essay written with red crayon It was well written, but red crayon? Seriously? I love a question I can legitimately answer. There was a happiest place prompt. Her happiest place was the bathroom. While pooping. A story about meeting poor people while on a service trip to South America, a frequent cliche that ended with tossing soap and pens and pencils to a small child who danced for them until he cried of gratitude, or perhaps because teenagers were throwing things at him. Someone who wrote about her school trip to Ireland where she mentioned staring out at the Pacific Ocean from her hotel. Not a college admission officer, but I feel like if I went back to my Common App essay I'd die of embarrassment. Pretty sure I wrote it about being passionate about playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Which I promptly stopped playing a month after the Common App deadline. High schoolers are fickle. For the prompt what challenges have you overcome? My brother wrote about how he couldn't remember our aunts' names until he was 12 and finally remembered it. The same aunt we saw probably at least every other month, who lived 30 miles away, and one who we spent a week at the beach with every single damn year. He's applying now, and maybe I'm wrong, but I really don't think that essay is gonna help him get in anywhere. I worked in writing centers for several years and we helped people write these essays. Somebody came in with a med school essay about how she wanted to become a doctor to offer her family free surgery. So when I asked her about it and if she knew much about medical ethics, she said she thought operating on family members, especially plastic surgery, would be just fine. I also asked her if she knew about the Hippocratic Oath, and she had never heard of it. I was a college admissions consultant in Seattle for a year. The weirdest one was a kid that brought in his Common App essay, and the entire thing was about how much he loved his mom and how pretty she was. He wanted to go to college in the States then move back to Seattle so that he could work and live with his mother. Edit. Yes, both of his arms were broke. I actually have two friends that wrote cringy essays. One applies to a film school and wrote about how Paul Blart, Mall Cop, inspired his love for film. The other had the question, who is your role model? His reply, Dolph Lundgren. They even indirectly called him out for it at the admitted students reception. Edit. Dolph Lundgren was not the bad part of it, but that they specifically called him out on it in front of the entire incoming class of admitted students and their parents' families. Dolph is an amazing man who can smell crime and is a worthy role model of any decent person. We had a girl at my high school who was extremely smart, really delicate personality and overall sweet. I can't remember why, but in our honors English class we all had to read our college essays out loud. I think it was to make sure we actually did them, but I can't remember. She gets up and starts reading her essay, and over the course of it all of us start looking at each other in the most WTF way. Her whole essay was about how she has never faced adversity or hardships in her life, and she felt that gave her a disadvantage in the application process. None of us knew what to even say. Am I supposed to comfort you and tell you life gets worse? Needless to say she learned pretty quick what rejection was when she didn't get into the college she'd really wanted. My aunt worked in admissions for a college, and occasionally they would get letters from foreign students asking if they could attend for free, based on some kind of hardship. Sometimes, it was under horrible circumstances, like they were from a war-torn country and their family is gone because their village was massacred, things like that. One girl wrote and offered a dowry of 3 chickens, which was sad, but sort of cute. The one that cracked them up was a Nigerian student who was clearly working from an English e-translation book, saying that his grandfather raised and educated him, but he recently passed away, leaving him with no more education. Except instead of saying he died or passed away, he said he kicked the bucket and promised himself he'd make his grandfather proud after he croaked. Apostrophe. My college essay was about how I never pay attention in class. It was a well-written essay. I assumed that they thought it was somehow quirky and unique, and that I wasn't being serious, because I got accepted. Then I failed out, because I never pay attention in class. I warned them. Not an admission officer, but I work at a high school, where I help students with college applications. This one kid wrote this honest essay where he rambled incoherently about how he wanted to be a doctor, lawyer, or finance person. Because let's be honest, I just want to make money. I paraphrased, but captured the grace and charm of his response. He really thought he was being clever too. kind of the opposite, but I wrote my college essay with the prompt "Why do you want to move to Virginia?" with my thesis statement being that I needed to catch all 151 Pokemon and Snorlax was residing in Virginia. Got in, lol. I follow an advisor at college on Snapchat and get her funniest daily. The hardest thing I have ever done in my life is play lacrosse. It really doesn't get any better than that. I wrote about my favorite fictional character for the Common App back in 2013. My favorite character was Plankton from SpongeBob. I described how he was perseverant and never gave up trying to get the Krabby Patty recipe, and then related it to myself trying to learn as much as I could and become enlightened. And that I knew it was impossible to learn everything, but I'd never stop trying to learn as much as I could. Stupid as hell, now that I look back on it. But, hey, I got into a great school. Edit. Thanks for the support y'all. I still feel a little off about it, because I actually use the word enlightened. That in itself is pretty cringy to me, but I was proud of it at the time, and it got me where I'm today. A teacher in high school made an assignment where we had to write an essay to one college. Super cool of her. A guy made a huge stink of if he should include how his sister killed herself, and he tried to kill himself, and that's why his grades were so low. Edit. I was watching Hulu and slipped. Not an admissions officer, but I'd like to think my essay was one of their cringiest. I wrote a very earnest and thoughtful piece on the history and cultural relevancy of Japanese dating sim games. Still got me into college. My top 2 are currently, as an answer to a question about how they contribute to their community. Delivering pizza helps hungry people. Pulling weeds makes the community look better and people feel happier. I have a friend who reads these. Her favorite was someone whose entire essay was "Please don't accept me. I don't want to go here. My dad forced me to apply. I want to go to art school." I'm not an admission officer, but my uncle let me read one of his admission essays that did not get him into the university of his choice. He did end up going to a good school and has a PhD, but his admission essay was so cringy. Basically, he went on and on about how much of a good white boy he was and how big of a shame it is that affirmative action and liberal schools are so desperate for minorities and completely forget about all the good old white boys like him who actually earned their place by working hard. It was so ducking awkward, and he was so proud of it. I guess we all have that uncle. Apostrophe. Somewhat related, I wrote a grad school essay a few weeks back for political science, and one of my reviewers asked to read it. I was still editing it, but I sent it to her anyway. At the top, I had copy-pasted the bullet points from the school's site listing what they looked for. Stuff like discuss how the program fits into your career goals, etc. Close bracket. There was one bullet point asking what had sparked your interest in the field, and next to it, I had just written the ducking election. Apparently she almost peed herself. Not a college admissions officer. I wrote my college essay on how I had no idea what was going on ever, and how I had no plan for my life. Sent it to an expensive private college. They accepted me, and I'm currently going there. I guess they liked that I was a clean slate. I dunno. I used to work in admissions and now work as a school counselor, so I could go on and on about the bad essays I've read. When I worked in admissions, I read all of the school's applications from Chinese students, so many of the essays were poorly translated from English. The most memorable one was when the applicant wrote about taking care of her grandfather and how she had to give him baths. I like to rub his wrinkly skin back and forth and wash his floppy crotch. I will never forget floppy crotch for as long as I live. Not sure if this is relevant here, but I'm an Indian and I have had a few ex-colleagues and classmates go on to do their MBA in US. I cringe when they go do social work as part of their program, in fancy t-shirt with logos, gloves, anti-glare glasses, etc. Here in India they would have an army of underage servants, working for a pittance, doing menial work like fetching their shoes, tying their shoelace, collecting their leftover food, etc. If they wanted to do some social good, they could have started at home. I know of one guy who is smart, has worked in Fund, and went on to a top school. I asked him if it made him uncomfortable to lie, and he agreed he felt bad he couldn't just be himself on his application, but had to fit into the admission criteria box of being well-rounded.